coming. I'd like to discuss today, as the title suggests, various halachos of Yarmulkas and keeping our heads covered. A little disclaimer before we start: we are not going to be discussing the specifics of shilas which come up often in various professions or workplaces of wearing a yarmulke in or out of an office or other, professional situations. That requires a sensitive discussion with a LOR, local Orthodox rabbi. We're just going to be discussing a lot of background information, the sugyas of yarmulkes and or kippot, or skull caps, where they come from, and what the various reasons might be behind them of why we do it. So the first Gemara we're going to discuss is the Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Lamed Aleph. And the Gemara there brings two members, seemingly unrelated, but we're going to do a careful reading of the Gemara and pick up on a slight nuance. The Gemara says, Rabbi Shiur ben Levi, Asar la'adam sheyahalech arba amos b'koyim zekufa. It's forbidden for a person to walk 4 amos in an erect posture. Shenemra, like the pasuk says, Malei kol haaretz kivoda. Hashem's glory fills the world. So the first halacha the Gemara is letting us know is that it's asar, it's forbidden for a person to walk around in a pompous state, walking around looking like he's God's gift to humanity. That is asar because that's gaiva, and that's it, straightforward isser. The Gemara, the next member of the Gemara is Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua. Lo maski arba amos begilei harosh. A person should not walk or travel 4 amos begilei harosh with an uncovered head, because Amar Shechina l'mayla miroshis. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua said a person is not appropriate for him to walk around 4 amos because of the svara of Shechina l'mayla miroshis. So I'd like to make 2 diyukim. Number 1, that the Gemara here did not say, Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua didn't preface and say that it's asr, it's forbidden. He just said that it's not a low maski, a person should not do this. Furthermore, he doesn't quote a pasuk like the previous Gemara brought. He just says a svara. The svara is, and he's giving the reason to keep our head covered, is because shechina l'mala miroshi. These are not my own diyukim. These are the diyukim that we'll see later on the next page. In number 6, the Chidah speaks this out from various places.
Isn't you're saying that he did it?
Which is, I'm not sure. I think he's kind of saying what a person should do, but the next Gemara is like Ramil is saying.
Like Ramil said, it doesn't say Amar Rav Huna.
Right. That's
it
also
says
true.
Rav Huna lay maski, and it's like he didn't.
Right, and that's clear. For sure, you're correct in the next Gemara. The first Gemara, I'm not sure. Perhaps you could argue that the next Gemara, which is the Gemara in Shabbos, it's the same Mandi Amar Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua. Teisi Li, give me credit, so to speak. Give me a pat on the back. The Sagina. I don't go 4 amos with an uncovered head. So it's clear from this Gemara that he's saying, so to speak, as an extra credit, that this is something good that I do. And that's how most of the Rishonim explain this Gemara, that there's a lot of the Gemara that has a list of different Amoraim who said Teisi Li for various Hanhagas, different things that they did. And that expression of Teisi Li is an expression of something which is not, I'm doing something which is not obligatory, I'm just doing something which is laudable and admirable. So far from these 2 Gemaras from the Memras of Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, it seems to be that covering our heads, at least to travel for a walk 4 amos or more, is something which is admirable but not necessarily obligatory according to the strict letter of the law. But also the Gemara told us in Kedushin that the reason why we wear a yarmulke, or Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua wear a yarmulke at least, is because of this concept of Shechina l'mayla miroshi, to remember that the Eibishter is above us. This halacha from Gemara Kedushin is brought, the exact lashon is brought in Shulchan Aruch, which is number 3 in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch and Arachayim Siman Beis. The Shulchan Aruch groups these 2 halachas together also, that it's asur for a person to walk b'koyim zekufa, it's asur for a person to walk in such an erect posture. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't give exact shiurim what that is, but we have to figure it out ourselves.
Talking about any place.
Any place. A person should never walk around with his nose too up in the air. That's never appropriate, because that's too haughty. The next part of the halacha, and here that you can see from the Lashon Shulchan Aruch, the way he writes it explicitly, V'lo yelech dal amos begilei harosh, a person should not go 4 amos without a head covering. Again, he doesn't write the word asr for some reason, kind of conveniently leaves that out, but he says you shouldn't do it. Now, a no of the Shulchan Aruch is pretty strong as itself, but nonetheless, the diak here is that it doesn't say specifically it's asr. And just jump down for a minute to number 5, which is the Beis Yosef in a different siman later on in Siman Sadi Aleph, the opening couple line over there. The Beis Yosef, he quotes a Kolba, a Rishon, who says explicitly that because of that Gemara in Shabbos, that in Kedushin, that it's not obligatory. Therefore, the Shulchan Aruch is just learning it as a midas chasidus, so to speak. It's an act of piety. It's admirable not to travel, not to walk 4 amos with gilei harosh. Fine. In number 4, there's a Masechta called Masechta Kal Rabasi. In the back of Masechta Avodah Zarah in the Gemaras, there's a collection of many Masechtas called Masechtas Ketanis. It's Brises and other Masechtas, and Rabbi Florence pointed this out to me a couple of weeks ago before I even knew we were giving a share discussing Yarmulkas. And there, the Masechta Kal Rabasi brings down a fascinating incident. The Gemara there, or the Brisa there, brings down that there were three Talmidei Chacham, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Shiur, who were sitting together and probably learning something, and two boys, walked by these three Talmidei Chachamim. One of them had their head covered, and one of them didn't. So Rabbi Eliezer looks at the boy who has an uncovered head and said, that kid who's walking around without a yarmulke or without a head covering is a mamzer.
Oh, wow.
Rabbi Yeshua said, no, I argue with you. The kid who walking around without a head covering is a ben nida, meaning they're the husband and wife are not keeping the laws of family purity properly, and that child is a ben nida. Rabbi Kiva says, no, I argue with both of you. That child who's walking around without a yarmulke is a mamzer and a ben nida. His mother committed two offenses. So the other Talmidei Chacham, Rabbi Elazar, just by walking around with on a yarmulke, they said right away, something's wrong with that kid. And there's a three-way machlokes, what's wrong with that kid?
I don't know.
What? So they challenged Rabbi Akiva, and they said, Rabbi Akiva, we only give the guy one strike, so to speak, against him. You're giving him two strikes against him. Prove your position. Rabbi Akiva said, okay. Rabbi Akiva tracked down the mother of this child. It's interesting, the Brisa gives details that she was working in the marketplace selling kitniyas, selling some type of beans. I'm not sure why that detail is necessary, but the Brisa brings it down. Rabbi Akiva tracks her down and says, woman, I would like to ask you a question, and if you answer me honestly, I promise you Olam Haba. And the interesting point of the Brisa, which we're not going to focus on right now, is that although Rabbi Akiva swore and promised to this woman that he'll give her Olam Haba, in his heart he was mevatel that shvua. He only did it to, so to speak, pacify that he should get the information, and there's a whole discussion itself how he's allowed to do that. We're not going to discuss it now, and there's reasons how he's allowed to do that. But okay,
do that
so
3 weeks.
Maybe okay, but. So she says, okay, I'll tell you the truth is that I got married to my husband, and at the time, after the chuppah, after we consummated the marriage, I tell my husband that I'm a nida, and he was so disgusted that he was punished me right away, and I went ahead and I was mizaneh with one of the shoshvinin, one of the company people that was helping us with the wedding. So it comes out, she said that my son is a mamzer because I was already technically a married woman. I just completed my chuppah, but I was a nida, and therefore my husband, for whatever reason, didn't want to stick around with me. So I had an affair with another man, and that son is actually a mamzer ben nida. Rabbi Akiva reports his findings back to the other Talmidei Chachamim, and they were of course blown away. And the Gemara said, the Brisa ends off, "Ba'isa Shah Amru Baruch Shegila Saida Akiva ben Yosef." How great Akiva ben Yosef was that he was able to see this. Somehow was able to discern that just from looking at somebody walking around without a yarmulke. Unfortunately, I forgot. I cut off. The Brisa continues 2 lines later, and I wrote it down. For some reason, when I was making the copies, I didn't put it down properly. The Brisa there concludes later and says, "Shema mina gilei roish azus tekifuhu." That walking around without a head covering is severe azus. Arrogance. There you go. That's a good word. Something that's severe, not just a low level. So this Brisa of Masechta Kal Rabasi, in later on in that Brisa of Masechta Kal Rabasi. Kal Rabasi. It's from the Masechtas Ketanas in the back of the Gemara Avodah Zarah. So this svara is not necessarily brought in the Shulchan Aruch, but I'm just bringing out from the Tanoim that they were able to discern very severe background checks just by looking at somebody and realizing he was not wearing a yarmulke. Okay, so let's carry on. In number 6, which is the Birkei Yosef, he really speaks out a lot of what we said when we were reading the Gemara in the Shulchan Aruch. That pashtus of the Shulchan Aruch, again, without that Kal Rabasi, it's a simple understanding is that covering the head is a midas chasidus, is something admirable, but not mandatory. And the Marshal, number 7 in Shuvas, speaks out like this as well, and he brings other rayas. And I just wanted to point out the Marshal at the end of the Shuvas, it's not underlined in your version, but in mine I underlined it. The last 2 or 3 lines, he says, "V'achshav," he writes that unfortunately nowadays, hu lehepech, we see the contrary. B'koma zekufa einam nizharin, people are not careful, and they walk around in a haughty manner with their nose up in the air, so to speak. V'adrabba, hageyim v'ashirim holchem b'tuyei garin. Everybody is walking around, or the rich people and the people who think that they're God's gift to humanity are walking around with their nose up in the air. But unfortunately, Gilei Araish is hard. But everyone's makbet to wear a yarmulke, and he says it should be the exact opposite. The yarmulke is only midas chasidus, and the Chaimaz Kufa is Meikar Adin, and he's bemoaning the fact right in his day, about 500 years ago, this has become a common practice that everyone was wearing yarmulkas, but people are not being careful with their gaiva. Okay, historical fact, and we see unfortunately that history continues to repeat itself. Yeah, okay.
What do those last words mean?
People think that Das Yehudasu, that's like the 614th mitzvah. That this is people think that yarmulke is so important, so they'll wear that before they're careful on their gaiva. So I just use the expression, people consider like a 614th mitzvah. I think it's the most crucial thing. And like we're saying, it's midas chasidus so far. That's what we said so far. However, the Magen Avram in our Chaim Siman Beis brings down that although the Gemara until now and the Paiskim until now were discussing traveling or walking 4 amos, nonetheless, the Magen Avram writes, there's a midas chasidus afilu pachas vidal amos. Even someone's walking just 1 or 2 steps, or an amount less than 4 amos, however much 4 amos is, between 6 and 8 feet. Even if you're walking less than that, Magen Avram learns that there's a midas chasidus to be careful even less than dal amos. So again, just reiterating the point that till now, all the Paiskim are clearly saying it's a midas chasidus, it's laudatory, it's admirable, but it's not ma'akev, and it's not necessary according to the strict letter of the law to have our heads covered at all times. However, a quick jump over to Hilchos Shabbos, and we'll see in number 9, the Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Shabbos is discussing there a halacha. The Shulchan Aruch paskins that there are certain articles of clothing that we cannot wear on Shabbos in a place where there's no Erev, because we're afraid that you might take them off for various reasons. And we'll just discuss the case that's important to us right now. There are certain types of hats which the Shulchan Aruch discusses that are meant to protect from sun or from rain, whatever they're meant to protect from, but they're very loose fitting, and we're afraid they'll just blow off very easily, even with a small wind. And if there's no Erev, we don't allow you to wear them on Shabbos because we're afraid they'll just quickly blow off, and you'll hold it in your hand and you'll come to carry. That's what the Shulchan Aruch is discussing. What exactly these hats are nowadays, I don't know. I'm not familiar with all the haven't gone to a hattery in a while to see exactly what type of hat just is very loose, but okay, we can use our imagination, something which is very loose and we're afraid it'll fall off. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings down in Sifkan Kuf Nun Gimel, which is in number 9, the first line, he says, the only halacha we're talking about here, he clarifies, is only something which is an additional hat. He says, but the yarmulke, the koiva katan that we're wearing on our heads, he says, of course no one will walk Dal Amis, Birshus Harabim, without a yarmulke on Shabbos. So even if a person's wearing a loose-fitting yarmulke, and even with a small amount of wind, it'll blow off, or as we get older sometimes, I'm getting there, as our heads get, start losing some of the hair, so the yarmulkes might slip off easier. They come bigger, right? We'll get to there shortly. But the Mishnah Berurah says, La halacha, since no one walks around without a yarmulke, so it's pashut, even if your yarmulke is loose-fitting, the Mishnah Berurah says you can wear it on Shabbos, even in a place where it's not an Erev. So I just want to point out.
Wear a yarmulke under a hat too?
Oh, that could be. That's true. Yeah,
the hat blows off. At least
you always have a head covering. But the Mishnah Berurah here is clearly writing. Although everything we said till now clearly shows that it's only midas chasidus. So seemingly it's an extra pan in the back for all of us that are wearing yarmulkes all the time. That's what it seems like. But nonetheless, when it comes down to Hilchos Shabbos, we're saying, although it might be midas chasidus, but since everybody does it, so then there's no concern that you'll ever come to carry a yarmulke if you're walking in the street, even if it blows off, because you'll never walk Dal Amis without a yarmulke. And if it was really only something which was a strict midas chasidus, I don't think the Mishnah Berurah will be able to say this halacha, because people might walk Dal Amis without a yarmulke, because it's only something that's admirable.
It's
but
a very nice inference, but you really haven't showed the transition of.
Okay, we'll get there step by step. Fine, but I'm just pointing out that until now, from everything we said, it seemed like a midas chasidus. Nonetheless, in Hilchos Shabbos, it seems to show that everybody does it, and therefore no one would ever dare carry their yarmulke on Shabbos. Another point I want to make out till now, seemingly everything we've said till now should include men and women, and we're all quite aware that common custom nowadays is that women don't wear yarmulkes, at least in the Orthodox circles. And the question is, we can ask why not? The Gemara didn't differentiate between men and women. The svar of the Gemara of Shechina Lamala Meroishi should apply equal to men and women. Everything we said till now didn't seem to make it necessarily a difference between men and women. So why is it the common practice is that nowadays, at least women in our circles, don't wear yarmulkes? So, first of all, I was thinking, and this I saw a lot of contemporary Svar bring this down, that the question doesn't apply really to married women, because married women generally will have their heads covered. So a married woman who has her head covered, so it doesn't make a difference, because we've never really clarified this point yet, but seemingly, as we should all understand from what we learned till now, it doesn't make a difference if you're wearing a black velvet yarmulke, a red velvet yarmulke, a baseball cap, or anything. The point was, as long as your head is covered, if you're wearing a keffiyeh, as long as your head is covered, that should simply be sufficient. So if a married woman is wearing a hat, or a tichel, or a snood, or a sheitel, it doesn't make a difference what she's wearing on her head is covered. So, okay, we've taken care of married women.
Outside the home.
Okay, for sure outside the home. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach brings down that he writes this as the custom. I'm not saying this is the custom. I'm saying what he writes as the custom, that from what he understands, the custom of a married woman, even if they're not always careful to cover their heads in their home at all times, which is not necessarily obligatory according to strict letter of the law, he writes that the minhag is that when a married woman makes a bracha, she'll always make sure her head is covered. I'm saying what he writes. I'm not saying that is common practice. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes that. That's the minhag by a married woman. Okay, maybe Yerushalayim was a little different. I don't know, but okay, that's what he writes.
A man's toupee would be the same thing.
Seemingly, let's say it's not sewn on, if it's a loose toupee, according to what we said till now, it should be okay. It should be sufficient. However, I saw this. I haven't really verified, but this is a shmua, so to speak. The Welt says that the reason why girls are not makbid, unmarried women are not makbid to wear yarmulkes, is because we already throw the book at them with so many halachas of tznius. They have everything with the neckline, the skirt line, the elbow line. There's so many gedarim that they have to be conscious of at all times. So then they don't have to need this reminder like we need of Shechina Lamala Meroshi, of the Shechinas above us at all times. They already are very mugdar, they're already very boxed into all the halachas of remind them at all times that they're a Bas Yisrael, and that is sufficient to let them bypass this halacha. I'm not saying that as a b'shem anybody particularly. It's a Welt says that over, but that's definitely the minhag, and we'll get to another reason maybe shortly why women don't wear yarmulkes. But at least according to what we said till now, even though it's a midas chasidus for us, for men to wear yarmulkes, it's common practice for women not to wear yarmulkes. Now, in the next page, number 10, the Taz brings down now a whole new reason for wearing a yarmulke. First, I just quoted the second part of the Taz. The first part of the Taz goes with most of what we said till now. For those who, it's in the old booklet, but there's a newer page for it because there's there's an addition right after the Taz. So if you need an extra page, it's over here. So the Taz brings down a whole new reason why we should be makbid on yarmulke. After he quotes the reasons of midas chasidus, he says where the arrow is. He says, "V'nira li." I'm going to introduce a new reason. Sheyesh iser gomor itam acher. There's a whole new reason. Tahainu kivan shechoku achshav bein ha'akom. Since it's a law or an accepted practice amongst the non-Jews, she'oisen kein tamid, that they always are revealing their heads, meaning takif sheyashur, right when they sit down indoors. Parkin me'aleim hakova, they remove their head coverings. V'imkein ze nichlal bichlal of bichukoseim lo selechu. He says now it'll become included in the gather of the pasuk, the araisa law of bichukoseim lo selechu, that we're not allowed to go after the ways of the Gentiles and follow their practices. Says the Taz, since it's became practice nowadays that goyim, when they come inside, even for non-religious purposes, they're just going to sit down. It's considered proper to take off your head covering. You don't sit and have a meeting with somebody wearing a hat. So since that became the way the goyim act, says the Taz, it now became usher for a man, a Jewish man, to take off his yarmulke, because now it's like we're imitating the goyim and we're uncovering our heads. And he says, Kol Shekain, Taz was roughly 400 to 500 years ago. Kol Shekain, he writes, B'choik zeh, in this edict, sheyesh tam de kisirosh mara yer shemayim. Like we said, that the whole idea behind the yarmulke, the head covering, is yer shemayim. So he says all the more so that we should be extra stringent, and they're trying to take it off to show that there's nothing above them, so to speak, that they're free. So we have to be extra vigilant in keeping the yarmulke on our head, says the Taz, because of a whole new reason, nothing to do with midas chasidus.
So would that be technically that if you don't want to go into their chukah, that means when you come into a room, don't take off your yarmulke? But this doesn't necessarily mean like just never wear a yarmulke. No, the of the game is that they wear a hat, but they take it off when they sit down.
Right, seemingly, right, very good. Seemingly from the Taz is that they, at least the way he's writing it, is before before JFK took off his hat, right? So according to the Taz, it would seem like that the goyim wore hats in the street, as was common practice. And then when they would come inside, any indoor setting doesn't necessarily mean when they would go to Beis Avodah Zarah. It sounds like from the Taz they would take off their hats, because
technically, if that's the style was to wear a hat, and then when you came in to take it off, so it could be even wearing a hat would be chukas and.
Okay, well that will raise that question in a minute of exactly the parameters of chukas and. So hold on 1 minute for that thought. But again, so we have so far the Midas Chasidus aspect, which all the pais can bring down, and now we have a whole new reason for the stringency to wear a yarmulke, and that's because of Chukosei Lo Sleichu, not to imitate the ways of the Goyim.
And Magen Avraham would argue on this?
Magen Avraham doesn't discuss this, so either he can argue or he agrees. That's all pashut. You have to write it.
But he says it's Midas Chasidus.
Right?
Clearly.
He says Midas Chasidus afilu pachas midal amas. So what about more than dal amas? Is it Isser Gamor more than dal amas? Okay, there's what to argue. That Magen Avraham, there's actually, I only quoted one Magen Avraham. There's actually 3 Magen Avrahams the place can deal with, and they're trying to make a whole shtickle tar of that. We're going to try to stay to what we have over here right now. So I brought down a story with Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zatzal, and Rab Zevin. Rab Zevin was one of the greatest minds of the past generation. He was a walking encyclopedia, so we decided that he will make Encyclopedia Talmudis. And thanks to him, we can still continuing nowadays. He already passed away about 30 or so odd years ago, but he was the one who really set up the whole Encyclopedia Talmudis. He wrote all the titles for all the chapters of what was ultimately going to be, and although he perished before it was completed, and we're still working on it nowadays, but he was an encyclopedia of Talmudic knowledge, and he was once talking and learning with Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in Yerushalayim, I'm sure somewhere, and he commented to Reb Shlomo Zalman that it's interesting that the Paiskim don't bring down why women don't wear yarmulkes. And it's very bothersome, he's collecting all the information from everybody, and he has everything stored in his Google head, and he can't seem to find a valid reason why women should not wear yarmulkes. So Shlomo Zalman says right away, it's a Chsam Sofer in Nedarim Daf Lamed. Now, the Gemara in Nedarim Daf Lamed is discussing an interesting case. Daf Yom will be there in about 2 weeks. Of an interesting neder, if someone takes a neder and says that I'm being muder hanar, I'm withholding benefit from a type of people that are called shechure harosh, dark-headed. And the Gemara discusses what does it mean, shechure harosh, dark-headed. It says it can't mean that you're referring to children, because children's heads are always revealed. They're not wearing anything on their head. It can't mean you're referring to a woman's head, because a woman's head is always covered, discussing a married woman's head. So the Gemara says it must be that the term shechure harosh refers to men, because men's heads are sometimes covered, and men's heads are sometimes uncovered. That's what the Gemara says. So again, if someone takes a neder and says, I'm refraining from hana, from a shechure harosh, from a dark-headed person, strange use of a term, the Gemara concludes that it refers to men, because men's heads are sometimes covered, and men's heads are sometimes uncovered. So Taisus and Rishonim there discuss that because with the Gemaras we discussed previously in Kedusha and Shabbos, those Gemaras only be this Chasidus, like we said before, that other Gemaras which seem to imply that a person has to keep their head covered at all time is only admirable. It's not Ikar Adin. However, and therefore there will be some times where a man's head is uncovered. However, it continues the Chasam Sofer and says about 3 lines down in number 10 Aleph, he says, Umikol Makom Nirali, that that's all the times of the Gemara and the Rishonim. But Bismaneinu, he says that men have to be very, very careful not to uncover their heads. And he quotes the Taz, and he says, because the Taz says the reason, like we just spoke out, of Ubuchukoseyam Lo Sedleichu, and therefore now it became an Issa Midaraisa. Chasam Sofer is explaining that until the Goyim adapted this practice of uncovering their head, so everyone could agree that it was only Midas Chasidus, it was only laudatory to keep our heads covered at all time. But once this developed into becoming a Goyish practice, it now became an Issa D'Araisa to walk around without a yarmulke. And it continues the Chasam Sofer, and he says, with that we can explain why women don't have to cover their heads. He said because the Goyim are not makbid that women have to uncover their heads. It's customary, I guess in his time at least, that the Goyim allow their wives, or the women in general, were allowed to keep their hats on in all settings. It was never considered improper for a woman to sit with a hat on, or a head covered in any setting. Therefore, says the Chasam Sofer, since the ikar reason nowadays to wear yarmulkes is b'chukasem lo sedleichu, and that doesn't apply to women, because there's no restriction for women to, or no specific reason for women to keep their heads covered all the time. So if a girl would want to walk around with the head uncovered, that's not related at all to any goyish practice, and therefore, he says, it did not become the custom for girls to keep their head covered. That's what the Chasam Sofer wants to suggest as a basis for why nowadays girls don't have to keep their heads covered with the yarmulke. Now, similar to what Rabbi Florence brought up before, this whole premise of the Taz and the Chasam Sofer going with the premise of the Taz is very problematic, because in the Chacham Ovadia in Shuvas, in Yabi Omer Chelik Tes Siman Aleph points this out, and he says, because if you look in Yeridea, in Siman Kuf Ayin Ches, where it discusses all the parameters of the halacha of Fukoseim Lo Selecho, of not mimicking the ways of the Goyim, the Ramah brings there from a Chuvas Maharik, from the earliest Achronim, that the only time we're concerned for Chukas Akum is when the Goyim are doing something B'derech Chayk, where they're doing it as a reason for their religious, to carry out a specific religious purpose, or they're doing it just l'shem pritzis, because they want to be paros. But if they're doing it just for reasons of comfort, like, I don't know when the first short sleeve shirt was invented, but short sleeve shirts are not a chayk for a religious reason to wear it or not to wear it, or l'shem pritzis. It's just a matter of comfort. In the summer, it's more comfortable to either roll up your sleeves or wear short sleeve shirts. You're not going to say that just because some guy invented a short sleeve shirt that becomes chukas ha'akum. So just because the goyim, for matters of comfort nowadays, practice when they're sitting in an indoor building, for sure at least before the days of modern air conditioning, that they would take off their hats, they don't have to sit there and schwitz in their streimels, that doesn't become chukas akum to leave your head uncovered, says Chamavaja. So he says it's very problematic to qualify halachically that this is chukas akum. He brings other achronim who agree with him that this is going to be chukas akum. That the reason why we have to be careful to wear our yarmulkas, because goyim dafka take it off, because the goyim again are not doing that for a specific religious purpose. The only reason why they're doing it is for matters of comfort. And when it comes to matters of comfort, so they can wear a cotton shirt, I can wear a cotton shirt. It happens to be comfortable. There's no goyishtikkeit to it just because the goyim uncover their heads.
But they make sure that when they go into a base of Avodah Zarah, they take the hat off.
Okay.
They may stay with a hat on in a pub, but they for sure take it off when they go.
Okay, if that's true, then perhaps. But the way at least the Taz is presenting it, the Taz was not presenting it particularly as a base of Avodah Zarah versus a pub. He said in general, when they sit down, they take off their hats. They don't sit in a hat. It's not considered. So that led me to understand. That's the way at least the other person seems to be understanding it. It was general. It wasn't limited to a base of Avodah Zarah. If it's correct what you're saying, then perhaps you can still argue that right. That's their practice in a base of Avodah Zarah setting. So then maybe that's taka, more like a religious practice as opposed to just a comfort practice.
From South Africa?
No.
No? Why? I've got an accent. I was just wondering, maybe that's the way they do it in South Africa.
It's also, if most goyim drive Volvo,
Right.
so we can't drive a Volvo.
Exactly. Right. That's Chamavaja's point. That's not a chuk goyim. If it's a comfortable car, you got leather seats, you got heated seats, you got a good sound system, everything's great. You got steel bars on the side so it protects you. That's not chukas akum. That's just comfort. He said if both goyim will drive Volvo, will that become usher? Right. If it's just a matter of comfort, then that shouldn't make something usher. So Chamavaja and others very much question this premise of the Taz, but okay, I don't want to harp on this too much. But many poskim say the Chassam Sofer, and there are others that do go with this Taz, so it's still on the table. We're not completely rejecting it.
Yeah, but it's not a matter of comfort why goyim would take their hats off. It's they're showing kavod, like in a mannerly type of a thing to do.
That it's disrespectful to sit with a hat,
especially if there's ladies present.
Okay. All right. This will require, I guess, further discussion on proper etiquette. We have to get
my head was getting hot.
Well, no woman here, you can put it back on.
Put it on this way.
All right. Yeah.
If you go to bankruptcy court in East St. Louis, I come in with a hat, and the bailiff immediately says, so maybe
there's something.
there is
Okay,
something.
maybe by lawyers, maybe attorneys have a different. Okay, there's still what to argue. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, let's now discuss another svara. Comes along of Shlomo Kluger in number 11 in Shuvas Elef L'cha Shlomo. Elef L'cha Shlomo is actually a play on a pasuk that's discussing Shlomo HaMelech, but Shlomo Kluger, his name was Shlomo, wrote over 1,000 Shuvas and it was collected in a sefer called Ha'elef L'cha Shlomo. And in Shuva number Gimel, Shlomo Kluger, he brings down an interesting another halacha. Until now, we discussed two reasons to a background to the underpinnings of why we were a yarmulke, either chasidus, or now we brought down from the Taz because we were chukosei and lo selechu. However, we never discussed what's the shiur of a yarmulke. How long, how big, how large, how round or square or rectangular or oval does it have to be? Is there any minimum or maximum size? To a yarmulke. So Shlomo Kluger in Shuvas wants to suggest as follows. A couple lines down, he says, to the daiti, according to my opinion, yesh chilik, there's a strong distinction between gilu kol harosh, to uncovering one's complete head, lemiktzas harosh, to uncovering only part of the head. That which the Gemara says that a person should not go dal amas begilu harosh, which is mashma less than dal amas is mutter. He says less than dal amas is mutter if you're wearing what they used to call Pepsi Cola yarmulke, a really small head covering, something which is like a bottle cap, something really small. But if your head is totally uncovered, if you're totally bareheaded, says Reb Shlomo Kluger, it's also even to walk a centimeter. You can't move. You're frozen in place until your head gets covered. That which the Gemara says that less than dal amas is seemingly mutter, that's only with a small head covering, he suggests. He doesn't have a conclusive proof to this. He grapples with trying different proofs to it. But he says the shear for a yarmulke is roiv haroish, the majority of the head. Now, he doesn't bring the geometric measurements of how you figure that out exactly, where you measure from the forehead to the back, or how you figure out roiv haroish. We'll get to other poskim, how they discuss it later, but we'll use that terminology for now. Roiv haroish, the majority of the head, or kol haroish. But he says that's in order to move more than dal amas. To move less than dal amas, you could wear a small yarmulke. But he says if your head is totally uncovered, says Reb Shlomo Kluger, that will prohibit you from moving at all until somehow you get your head covered. Now, I wanted to point out, I forgot to make this distinction before, the halacha we've been discussing till now of just keeping our head covered, and primarily for the reason of remembering the Shekhinah above our head, the Mishnah Berurah speaks out clearly in Siman Beis that for that halacha will be sufficient to take our own hand and cover our head. Many of us are familiar with the halacha that if you want to cover your head, you have to take your shirt or something else and cover your head, and the hand will not be sufficient. That's only going right. That's going to be for the halacha, particularly we'll get to shortly. Of if you want to say a bracha or some davar shebekdusha, there's another separate halacha which we didn't discuss yet, that a head must be covered to when you want to say Hashem's name or any davar shebekdusha. For this halacha that we're discussing till now, which is just to remind us and be vigilant of the fact that there's a Shekhinah l'malam Roishi, the Mishnah Berurah brings down from many poskim and Siman Beis that will be sufficient just to go like this with your own hand, and that is enough to remind us that something is above us, and you can walk until you can get some other place where you can get a proper head covering. So even according to Reb Shlomo Kluger, what we're talking about less than dal amas, you're not allowed to move, so to speak. If you have nothing on top of your head, that will be sufficient though to take your own hand. You don't have to, get your sleeve up there or something like that to cover your head. It will be sufficient with your own skin to cover your head. The point is just to be cognizant that something's above us. Okay. Now, however, this premise of Shlomo Kluger is very troubling to many places, including Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal in number 12 in Tshuva Sigros Moshe. It's the first Tshuva in Ar Chaim Chelik Aleph, where the Shayel there asked Rav Moshe, is there a shear for yarmulke? Is there a minimum size? And he brings this Tshuva from Shlomo Kluger, which seems to suggest that you have to have at least roiv of your head covered. And Rav Moshe Feinstein very strongly questions this premise of Rav Shlomo Kluger and says it's very hard to understand what's the source, what's the basis for Rav Shlomo Kluger. It says, Pashash reading the Gemara, it clearly says that a person should not walk 4 amas begili haroish, with an uncovered head. Where did Rav Shlomo Kluger understand that to mean? Begili haroish means most of your head uncovered, but there was still something covered. He says, from the Pashash HaGemara and the Paiskim, there's seemingly no source for Rav Shlomo Kluger's chumrah. However, it's a long tshuva. I didn't really copy the whole thing. I just copied the first 2 paragraphs and a later paragraph where he gets to the bottom line psak. But in the middle there, Rav Moshe wants us to suggest that perhaps Rav Shlomo Kluger was coming really from the Taz. That Rav Shlomo Kluger was understanding the isser of even standing or not walking at all dal amas with a fully uncovered head is because of the halacha of b'chukosei lo selechu, and that's where Rav Shlomo Kluger was coming from. But the problem with that, as Chamavadia points out in Shuvas Yichavadas and other poskim ask, that Rav Shlomo Kluger doesn't mention the Taz at all. So it's hard to say that a source for Rav Shlomo Kluger's chumrah would be from the Taz. Be it as it may, Rav Moshe rejects Rav Shlomo Kluger's premise to understand the Gemara like that, and he comes out, which is the next paragraph copied over there. It says, L'maisa Rav Moshe paskins that if you want to be machmir to cover roiv haroish, which you get with many yarmulkes that are large size, it's great. Pat on the back for you. Abu Ladina says Rav Moshe, according to the strict letter of the law, ein b'chuyavin lachush l'daikta. We don't have to be concerned for the opinion of Rav Shlomo Kluger. Kivin shehi das yochid, because he's in independent shita, or befrachu rak iser midas chasidus. Since anyway, like we spoke out, according to most poskim, there's no biblical source for the yarmulke unless you're going with the Taz. But without the Taz's svara, there's no source midaraisa. It's only midas chasidus. Therefore, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, halacha lemaisa, you can wear a yarmulke of any size. He says it's appropriate to wear a yarmulke that could be visible. And Chacham Avadja in Shuvas Yichavadas passes the same way. He says he gives the shear that as long as anybody standing behind you, in front of you, on the side of you, can notice that you're wearing a yarmulke, that will be sufficient to get the shear in proper. If it's going to be all the way in the back of your head, even if it's very large, someone standing in front of you might not be able to see, etc. But that's where Moshe Paskins, that's the way Chacham Avadia Paskins, and there's another Chuvas from Avadia Hodaya, who was a Rav in Tel Aviv, chief rabbi in Chuvas Yaskel Avdi. He Paskins the same way, that as long as the yarmulke could be seen by those around you, that will be sufficient for the shear. However, within the Sephardi camp, this is not fully accepted. The Chuvas Ar L'Tzion, which is the Chuvas of Chacham ben Tzion Abba Shaul, was a Rosh Hashiva in Shiur Prat Yosef in the Old City, a great Sephardic Rosh Hashiva, passed away about 15 years ago or so. He passes very clearly, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he says, Pasha to him, that it has to be Roiv HaRoish. He doesn't say how you measure it. Again, I don't know if it goes from the front of the forehead to the back, all the way to the end of the neck, or the top circular part of the head, the dome of the head, so to speak. He doesn't get particular, but it would seem to be from him that there is more room to be machmir in regarding the size of the yarmulke. Now, he's a Sephardi, yeah.
I thought Sephardim don't even have the seals of yarmulke.
Okay, where are you coming from? It's true that many Sephardim might not practice it, unfortunately, but Chacham Avadia, that we quoted before, he writes very strongly that it's like, wearing a yarmulke nowadays is like making a statement that you're part of the fraternity of religious people. And if you're going to, Chacham Avadia says that it's true, the whole base, like we said, is from Midas Chasidus and everything like that, but he says if you're going to walk around in the streets, Begila Roish, he says you're making a public statement that this is not, you don't want to be part of the group of those people who are Shema Torah Mitzvah. So, it's true that if you go back a couple hundred years, or maybe even less than that, there are definitely very strong camps within, even from circles in Sephardim and Ashkenazim, who were not necessarily very stringent in it, but it definitely became much more accepted, and which is a good thing, especially according to the Taz, because it's a shaila of, and it's a deraisa according to the Taz. Now, but again, until now, we never discussed really what's the first earliest source where we see that people wore yarmulkes. People ask, does the Avram Avinu wear a yarmulke? Did Moshe Rabbeinu come down from Har Sinai wearing a yarmulke? These are great questions. We don't know the answer. We would like to believe that he was wearing some type of head covering, because the Gemara says it's laudatory to always have your head covered, but it's not mefurish anywhere. So I found Chacham Avadia actually quoted this in his tshuva in a kovetz called Kovetz Divrei Ze'ev. It's I looked it up online. There's about 10 or so odd volumes of this kovetz. They're about 30 pages each, and it was from a Rav in Yerushalayim. I think his name was Rav Binduitz, something like that, where he wrote these notebooks, and they were published, and just random Torah thoughts, paragraph after paragraph, a whole new idea, not flowing through any particular order, just, whatever he thought of an idea, he wrote it down in his notebook, and it was published, all his Torah thoughts. So of course Chacham Avadia, with his thirst for Torah knowledge, went through all of them probably, and he quoted this one in Chelek Hey Amud Yud Gimel, where he writes, this Rav, the Divrei Ze'ev, that he was once in Yafo, he was walking in Yafo, and someone came over to him and challenged him, and said, how could you tell me that according to the Paiskim that there's an Isser even to be indoors, under roof? We never really discussed this question so much, but okay, it comes out from a lot of discussion that we had till now, but many Paiskim say that even inside there'll be a prohibition to sit in your house without a yarmulke. He says there's a fascinating Gemara in Yuma. The Gemara in Yuma on Daf Chav Beis and continues on to Daf Chav Hey discusses how would they pick the different pais, the different groups of Kahanim who do the work every day in the base of Mikdash. The Mishnah there discusses that at first they used to have a race. Every morning the Kahanim would run, whoever got there first come, got the schus to do the avodah, until unfortunately someone once tripped and there was a tragic accident. Okay, so the Gemara said they changed the order. What they used to do is, the Kahanim from the Mishmeres, let's just say for argument's sake, there were 50 Kahanim who were working that day in the base of Mikdash. They would all, every morning, they would get together and form a circle. The Kohen Gadol will tell everybody to stick out as many fingers, a certain amount of fingers. They would, and let's say there were 50 Kahanim, so the Kohen Gadol would pick a number greater than 50. For argument's sake, he would pick 75, and he would start counting everyone's fingers. And whoever got number 75, he would be the one who got through the avodah first. The Gemara discusses how do they figure out which kind they would start from, and how should everybody know it's a big circle, 50 people in a large circle, how are you going to know where they're starting from? So the Mishnah of the Gemara says that they took off the Kohen's mitznefes. The Kohen who they started from, the Kohen Hedjit, was wearing a mitznefes, one of the big dekuna. They took off his hat. From there they started. So all the Kohanim in the circle knew that it started from Shmerel over there, who's walking, who's standing there without a hat, and they would count till they got to the right number, and that Kohen, the lucky number, wins the opportunity to do the avodah first. So this Rav challenged the Divrei Ze'ev and says, you see here clearly that there was Kahanim standing for a prolonged period of time, seemingly, without, until they finished the counting, without anything on his head. His head was uncovered.
They weren't walking.
Okay, they weren't walking, but even just to sit there for a period of time that takes to walk Dal Amis, many places, we didn't really discuss that so much yet, but okay.
Also the Makam
Right, Makam HaMikdash. But the point I want to bring out is the response to the Divrei Ze'ev. The Divrei Ze'ev responds to this Shayal, to this Rav, and says, you missed the boat. Mitznefes is a hat that you wear on top of something. Now, he doesn't prove this, but he says that it's pashut to him that the Kohanim wore a mitznefes, it was a fedora, so to speak. It was the hat on top of something else. He said, just like nowadays, like Rameir brought up before, we often wear a hat on top of our yarmulke. He says it was the same way in the Beis HaMikdash. They wore a mitznefes, which was on top of a koiva katan, a smaller hat, which he writes is Shu ki yarmulke, this is like a yarmulke. V'chein haya haminig b'daras hakoyin. He says this was always the custom. He doesn't source this, but he writes that this was always the custom. So at least according to Divrei Ze'ev, it goes back to the time of the Beis HaMikdash, to the first Beis HaMikdash, even when they used to do this with the order of figuring out how the Kahanim would go. That according to the Divrei Ze'ev, the Kahanim were even wearing yarmulkes under their hats. Now, this is a chiddush. He's not the only one who says this. Chacham Avadia brings the Pri Megadim and others who suggest this idea. Chacham Avadia questions it strongly because it's not really sourced properly, and he says seemingly if the Kahanim were wearing yarmulkes, that should be an extra beged. They should be miyuter begadim. The Kahanim had to wear a specific number of begadim, and we never see anywhere on the list a yarmulke. So either you can argue and say it's pashut. Of course, the Kahanim was wearing yarmulke. They don't have to list it. Or you can argue and say the Kahanim didn't wear yarmulkes; they only wore the mitznefes. So the debate is still standing, but at least according to Divrei Ze'ev and other poskim, this would be a perhaps a source that even the Kahanim in Beis HaMikdash wore yarmulkes under their mitznefes.
I thought mitznefes was like a turban you wrap around.
Okay, but what's under it? Is it just your head or a yarmulke? That's up for debate, and I don't know how to conclusively prove that.
Well, by the other,
when did the yarmulke first appear? It sounded to me like it first appeared in Poland is when the whole concept of the yarmulke.
Well, we see it's true. The yarmulke that we have today may be developed in Europe sometime, but at least in the times of the Gemara, we see Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua covered his head. Maybe he wore a keffiyah. I don't know. Maybe he wore a baseball hat. It's not clear what he wore. But that's the fact.
Baseball in those days, right?
He wore a stickball hat, whatever he wore, I don't know, whatever he got, or a stoop ball hat, I don't know, whatever they had pre-baseball days. But there was some type of head covering. Let's just end up with another halacha which we briefly discussed before, that the Shulchan Aruch later on in Siman Tzadi Aleph in Orach Chaim says that everything we discussed till now was discussing wearing yarmulke in a general sense, walking around, sitting around, doing regular everyday activities. However, when it comes to saying brachos or davening or even walking into a shul, the Shulchan Aruch clearly paskins yeshayimrim she'aser lo haitzi askar mipiv rosh megul. It's forbidden to say the shame of Hashem, and the place is going to stand any really davar shebekdusha with the head uncovered. And yeshayimrim, the Shulchan Aruch brings down that if a person walks into a shul without a yarmulke, you should make a macha and make him wear some type of head covering, whether it's a hat, a yarmulke, whatever it may be, he should have something above his head because the shul being a makom kaddish. And that's the halacha, and everyone agrees basically in here to this halacha that a yarmulke would be ma'akev and it's not just a midas chasidus. The question is, this is a question which often comes up during the summer months. Now we're enjoying the warm weather outdoors. A person's going swimming, and common custom is, at least by most people, although I saw that Moshe Sternbuch is makbid when he goes swimming to wear some type of head covering, but most people when they're swimming, let's say, are not wearing their head covering. They're not wearing a yarmulke. It's just very impractical to go swimming with, especially with a velvet yarmulke. It gets soggy and it'll weigh down your head and you'll lose your buoyancy won't be right? So the shaila is, when we're swimming, we're doing laps. Now, of course, usually during the day, with a lot of people walk around, always plugged into their iPads and whatever things. They have the headphones, or they can be thinking and learning at all times. Wearing a yarmulke, it's not a problem. The shaila is, like we discussed a couple weeks ago when we discussed Shabbos Sfir Sa'imer. Often we say the halacha of here is kedibur dami. It's debatable when we say it, when we don't. Meaning, if thinking about something, it's as if you're enunciating with your mouth. So here you have a guy doing his laps, and he wants to be thinking about Daf Yomi, or he wants to be thinking about something he heard from the rabbi's speech on Shabbos, or some other learning he wants to be thinking about. So is it usher to think and learning when your head is uncovered? Right? If it's going to be the halacha that we just said to say a bracha or say any davar shebekdusha, you always have to have your head covered. So here you have a guy, he's a tzaddik of a guy, he's got to do his exercise, and when he's on his treadmill, so he can keep his head covered, no problem. But here, his head is 99% of the time going to be uncovered. So it's an interesting question. one Ma'amakam I just copied out of here is the Be'er Halacha. The Be'er Halacha is discussing in the halachas in Shulchan Aruch Siman Ayin Gimel of being properly clothed when we make brachos in all parts of our body, not just the head. And the Be'er Halacha brings there from a sefer called Avodas Hayayim and Achrein that to be mahar in divrei Torah, although it's also if you're walking through Mekaymas Hamatunafim, meaning if someone's walking through a place where there's a foul odor, like a garbage dump or something like that, where there's a foul odor, it will be also to be mahar in divrei Torah because there it's considered inappropriate to think about davar shebekdusha. But he's discussing over there if a person is not properly dressed, and even if they're completely bare, it's permitted to think in learning. And he doesn't really get involved in the svara for why that is. But he says, for here Kedibor, we're not machmir if a person is unclothed. We're only machmir if the place itself is not set in a proper setting, like a garbage area where it's or foul odors, or a bathroom setting, something like that. There it will be ushered even to think in learning or think in brachas. But if it's just a person is lacking proper clothing, there the Be'er Halacha brings down, the Mishmur is quoting, that it will be permissible to think in learning and be mahar. So I would like to suggest that perhaps even when someone's swimming, even if their head is uncovered, although a person cannot make a bracha with the head uncovered, and if a person needs to take a drink by the pool, he would have to quickly cover his head. You can cover your head with a towel, or it doesn't have to be a yarmulka per se, you have to cover your head. But just to think and learning, that would be a kula that you can think mahar and divrei Torah with the heads uncovered based on this Be'er Halacha.